Do teams actually perform better after they fire their head coach? We're going to talk about that in today's video. As always, if you could like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. And, the season is coming near an end. I'm going to get more free time over the last month of the season, and obviously in the off season with the football kind of being over. And I'm going to be putting out more videos like this, more of these research-based videos that I was putting out, in the off season before the season started. And, a lot of the focus on my videos that have come out have been what's happening in season, which makes sense because that's what people care about. But now we can get to some more of these research videos. And, something that I want to explore in the off season is these fantasy football myths that we hear. We hear people say things, and we all just kind of accept them as true, but we don't actually know if they are. Maybe we don't get the research behind it, and maybe they are true, maybe they aren't. I don't want to give away too much because I'm going to be releasing these videos in the off season. But things like the zero RB strategy, which I explored before the season and this season, and teams that play the revenge game narrative and things like that. And one of the things I really wanted to look at, and it's topical because the Carolina Panthers just fired Frank Reich, is how well do teams actually perform after they fire their head coach, the game after they fire their head coach. So, I think we hear a lot of people say like they're going to be motivated. The players are going to be motivated. They're going to perform better because either they got rid of the head coach that no one liked, or they feel responsible for getting their coach fired, whatever it is. I think if you ask most people, do teams perform better after they fire their head coach? I think 80% of the people are going to say yes. And so I actually wanted to look at, is this true or not? So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. It's going to be a short one. It's not going to be very long. So I went back to 2010, and I looked at every interim head coach that took over for a fired head coach and how they performed up until that point, until the coach got fired, and then how they performed in the game after they got fired. Now, I left out I only included ones where the coach got fired, not like resigned, like the John Gruden situation and stuff. I didn't really add that to this list because it was like a firing, but it was kind of a weird situation. And then I also left out I think there was 2 or 3 cases in which a coach got fired with only one game to go. So the second to last week of the season, week 16 up until a couple years ago. Now it's week 17. Because the last week of the season, a lot of weird stuff happens. Players are playing that you have no idea their names, and guys are benching. The teams that have clinched playoff spots are benching players. So I kind of avoided adding those in there. So went back to 2010. There's actually 25 cases of coaches being fired in season. And, obviously these are not very good teams, most likely. There's 1 or 2 cases you're like, I don't know why they got fired. But anyways, I'm going to share with you a little spreadsheet I made here and just kind of talk through it, because I know this is mostly a fantasy football channel, but I'm also interested in just real football in general. And you can relate this to fantasy football. Like, you have players on a team whose coach got fired that are not performing, and you can be like, are they going to start performing better? Are they going to have a good game this next game? Kind of like what we saw with the Raiders this year, right? So here's the list here. Let me fix my screen so you can hopefully see a little better, and I can zoom in here. So you see the names of the teams on the side and whether or not they won. The points per game they were averaging up until the coach got fired, and then the points they scored directly after the coach got fired, and then the total yards they were averaging and the yards they had. And then I put the opponent record because I thought maybe that would be important, like, well, who are they playing type of thing. So you can see here that there's a lot more green than there is red if you're just looking at, right here, which is a good thing. Green means they improved or they won the game. Red meaning they either lost the game or they didn't improve on what they're averaging. And then there's a couple yellow, which means they had the exact same amount with the score at least. So 25 teams. Like I said, 25 teams that I looked at here since 2010 that fired their coach. And then there's been 14 wins, 11 losses. So there's actually more wins than losses, which I was a little surprised about, mostly because, again, these are usually really bad teams, right? If you're firing your coach mid-season, it means you're not playing well. Raiders, I think they were 500 or a couple games, one or two games under 500. There's a couple teams on here. The Ron Rivera firing of, I think it was back in, just looking, 2019, I believe. Was that? No, I think it was further. That was Matt Rule. There was a Ron Rivera firing. I don't know why I don't have it on here, but anyways, where it was kind of like, oh, that's strange. And they were like 5-6 or something like that. But you can see here that there's more wins than losses, and it's not 500. 14 wins to 11 losses, which I think is telling. That maybe there's something to players being a little more motivated. Average points per game was 18 for these teams, and it jumped up by 5 points a game, which is pretty significant if you ask me, to 23 points per game. So 17 of the 25 teams improved, scored more points than what they were averaging up until when their coach got fired. 6 were the last, 2 were the same. So 19 of the 25 either stayed the same or improved, and only 6 actually had a worse game. Again, I think that's pretty telling. We're talking about bad teams here, so there has to be maybe something to it, to being motivated after the coach gets fired. Yards, a little more arbitrary. Yards aren't the best statistic to gauge like how well you're doing or not. For fantasy football, it is relevant though, so I want to still add a little bit of fantasy football relevance to this. So you can see here there was 318 yards per game averaged by these teams, and that bumped up about 40 yards per game, which is significant enough. 357. Again, 17 of the teams increased their yards per game versus 8 that decreased. So, and then finally, opponent record is the last one here. As you can see, the ones in orange, I just considered them as bad teams just based on their record. I didn't go back and look at actually who were the team. Obviously I looked at who they played, but it wasn't the deep dive into were they really good or they have a bad record for some. I just kind of, all right, if you're 2-6, obviously 2-11, 1-4, 0-4, you're probably not a great team. There could be exceptions to the rules, of course, but I forget how many, but there looks like there's 4, 7, 10 teams of the 25 played pretty bad teams. So keep that in mind. And then there was really only about 5 of the teams played like really, really good teams. You can see here a 12-3 record, a 7-1 record, 8-4-1, 13-0, 6-2. But surprisingly, 3 of the 5 good teams they played against, they improved. And a couple of them they won. The Chiefs in 2011 beating the 13-0 Packers, and that was their only loss that year, was pretty impressive. The Cowboys beating the 6-2 Giants was pretty impressive. The 2018 Browns winning against a 7-1 team was pretty impressive. Oh no, they lost that game. Sorry, but yeah, the Dolphins. The Chiefs beating the 13-0 Packers is pretty impressive in my opinion. So, and then the rest are just kind of like mediocre teams. 2-3, 1-3. Don't really know if they're good or bad. 500 teams. So yeah, I mean, overall, I don't know if this really tells us much. I thought it was just interesting to look at just because I hear it all the time. So maybe if you're interested in betting, gambling, over-unders, fantasy football stuff, taking yardage over-unders or points, total points for, is the team going to be more motivated or not? It's possible. It seems the majority of teams do better than what they were doing before when their coach got fired, when they were under the coach that got fired. So I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence. It could be, but I don't necessarily think so. The Raiders of this year are kind of a perfect example of, and every situation is different. Like you got to keep in mind, like the Raiders this year, they were obviously, everyone was super happy that they, just checking my microphone. Everyone's super happy that they let go of Josh McDaniels, and Antonio Pierce comes in and kind of motivates them. He's like a player's coach. So I definitely think there's something to that. Now with the Panthers situation, with the Panthers situation, kind of a weird one. All the stuff that's coming out, like the owner, obviously he's fired 3 head coaches now at this point in Rivera, Matt Rule, and 3 head coaches in season, Matt Rule and now Frank Reich, sorry. And he's trying to call plays. I saw an article coming out today that he was like trying to call plays. He was the one that wanted Bryce Young, whereas maybe Frank Reich wanted CJ Stroud, which looks terrible. So kind of a weird situation here. And it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, that the players are not happy that Frank Reich, they actually really liked Frank Reich, and they're not happy that he got fired. So take that into account if you are trying to, think, if it's fantasy, you're trying to think, oh, is Adam Thielen or Chuba Hubbard going to play better and or not? And, or if you're gambling, just take that into account. Like, this just could be a terrible, terrible situation. They play the Buccaneers. They play the Buccaneers in this week, I believe. Yeah, in week 13. I would put the Buccaneers in that not bad, not good team. They're 4-7, but I think they're maybe slightly better than the record. So just thought it was interesting to look at. I'm going to be putting out some of these videos, especially during the offseason. Again, like these fantasy football myths, these things we hear people say all the time, and we kind of just believe them. Revenge games, again, is a really good example. This player is going to be more motivated because they're playing against their old team, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I'm going to look into it, as well as some others. So that's kind of all I have for you guys today. As always, we'll be still putting out more content. We got 2 more weeks for most people in their fantasy regular seasons, and then the fantasy playoffs start up. So it's gone by fast. We're already in week 13, so it's a little disappointing. We only really got like 5 more weeks of fantasy football stuff, 6 more weeks of the regular season, and then it's over. Then it's on to the playoffs. So it's always bittersweet when we start coming to the end of the football season, fantasy football season. So it goes by fast. So enjoy it, guys. As always, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys